Does science have any relationship with the Bible? Does science have any relationship with the Bible? Yes, science has a lot of relationship with the Bible. Well, should I say with Bible or with Christianity as a whole? Well, I mean, let me answer the question to say with the Bible, yes, it does. And how? Because there are things in the Bible that science, archaeology have found to be true, even even those like during the time that the Bible was recording these things, many of these things were not known to be scientific facts, right? And yeah, to be scientific facts, right? Like, and there are a number of other things. But we could see that one of them, I will just mention a few. I'll just mention a few, right? We have a few and a number of things that I want to see on this topic about the relationship of science and Christianity and science with Bible, right? There are a number of things I want to see on this topic on the relationship of science with Christianity and science with the Bible. But we have, or I have, a longer, like a 1 hour plus, if not up to 2 hours, teaching session that I did in 2024 about science versus Christianity. Right. Of course, this question right now cannot take up to 1 hour in answering. So I'm gonna probably put it there's gonna be a description for the YouTube video when I eventually cut this out and put the link to that video in here. But just going to answer very shortly on the relationship between science and Christianity. How do they link? How are they linked together? Is there a relationship, and does one disprove the other? That's essentially the whole point of the video. I'm going to link in the description of this video, right? But there is a shorter version of that answer that I want to give. Are there relationships? Yes. And it's really essentially what comes, right? The first thing in the Bible has a scientific connotation to it. And let me just go on before I go on to that. Let me just go on to say that there's an idea that people think that science and Christianity are at odds. But one thing that we need, or one of the things that we need to consider, is that there are two different things describing two different things about creation. So on one hand, we have the Christian explanation of saying this is why creation exists. So it's answering the question, answering the answer of why and from what. So Christianity is answering the question of where, excuse me, the origin of everything, which I'll explain a bit, is answering, the why for everything. Whereas, when we come to Christianity, we are not really looking to how the sun came up, what constitutes the universe in and of itself, explaining scientific details. That is not the goal of Christianity on one hand. It's explaining the why of everything. And that is why, that is the point of Christianity in and of itself. Right. And then we have science, right? The pseudoscience on the other hand. And the other hand, science is just describing the things within the universe itself, how the universe operates, how it came into be, how things operate right now. So there's a why and there's a how. The how is within the universe, studying what is and explaining what is, right? The how, right, is studying what is, it's observing, and then so it's what's it called? How do they say this now? It's studying what is, it's like an empirical observation of the universe, and then deriving laws, theories, and systematizing the universe, right? Which is science altogether, right? So there are two different things explaining two different things about creation. This is explaining why, right? What's the reason for the universe, and a lot of other things, including morality, and where morality came from, why we have morality in the first place, why there's a universe, what we are going after the universe. This is studying the universe and telling us how it works. So we can't say that they are at odds because they are not even on the same topic. to start with. Um, so that's a part of it. And then there's another thing. There's another, thing where Christians in and of themselves, and a lot of atheists have also held this idea that the things that science, just is with the premise that science contradicts Christianity in the first place. That the things that science describes, the if or let me rephrase that, if the Bible are not, if how do I rephrase this? The things that God created the universe, therefore God is outside science, therefore science can explain a lot of things. And if science not being able to explain a lot of things right now goes on to say that it is God that did it. But first of all, that is already annihilating the idea that God is responsible for everything in the universe. So that's any science can explain it, then God has no hand in it. That does not make sense. Then who did? Right. And secondly, it gives off, there's now an opportunity which has been taking a lot, in history, that, there was, God had done something and there was an explanation for science. So we all know it's a mystery. God did it. And then God did it that God did it that, there was there was now scientific explanations for those things. Right. There were now scientific explanations for those things. And then all of a sudden, the argument for saying that God was in charge of all of those things disappeared. Um, it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work at all. It doesn't work at all. So God is in charge of the universe. We cannot, and the idea that whatever science cannot explain, it is God that is in charge, is called the argument of, it's called the God in the gaps fallacy. God of the gaps fallacy, rather. That if science cannot explain it, it's the gap in science. The gap in science are God. But the Christian ideal doesn't even follow, because the Christian ideal holds that God is responsible for everything. And as I said initially, science is looking at the things that God has been responsible for, and is just describing how it works. So science is looking at the creation and how it is, and telling us essentially how it works. It's not a contradiction of one thing to the other. It's none of those things. It's the what's it called? It's describing the things that the Lord had already put. And how do we know that the Lord has put these things in place? We'll now go back to the initial thing I started with. We'll go back to what I started with, that the first thing, right, in the Bible has a connotation of science. So we say God created the heavens and the earth in the beginning. Many people say, so, with the idea that, science disproves Christianity or science disproves the Bible, many people say, that in the Bible God created the heavens and the earth, so God cannot be the one. Sorry, how do I say? So God created the heavens and the earth, not science. Science did not cause the Big Bang to happen to what's it called? To make the universe come into be. And I can say that there was a Big Bang. If you don't agree, that's fine. The only difference is that there was a Big Bang and there was a person that banged it. That's the difference between people who say there was a Big Bang, so that disproves Genesis 1:1, right? The Big Bang can have that connotation in Genesis 1:1, and can also not just be said, oh, because I'm saying it. We'll look at, there's evidence, right? There's proof that the universe had a beginning, and one of the very big proof that the universe had a beginning is the Big Bang, and there are evidence in astronomy, in space science rather, and that shows us that the universe has a beginning, right? And which correlates with the idea of Genesis 1, that the universe started at a point where God created the heavens and the earth. So, and which is what they call the Big Bang anyway. But the Big Bang just shows us that the universe had a beginning, that everything in space, time, and matter came to existence at a certain point. at an instance. Space, time, and matter, the time space continuum, came to existence at the same time. Time did not exist, but permits the um language usage, right? They came into existence together. That's the point. Time, space, and matter came to existence together. All right. So the Big Bang. So the how do we know that the universe had a beginning? Is a science. I'm going to be saying a lot of scientific, some of scientific jargon right now, but it's just five scientific observations that point to the fact that the universe had a beginning, which is second law of thermodynamics, the expanding universe, radiation afterglow from the Big Bang explosion, great galaxy seeds, and Einstein's theory of general relativity. These things are big ink, and there's no time to go into all of them because that would take a while to explain and break it down. But there's the video I mentioned earlier, link in the description. It's probably showing somewhere up here right now. Check it out. We went into this. I think in that video, I tried to break it down in layman terms as much as I could. Right. So, but the point is, science points to the fact that the universe had a beginning, which is what we call the Big Bang or the beginning of the universe. Right. And that correlates to what the Bible also says in Genesis 1. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Big Bang. Now, people can now say, are we now saying that is not a God of, am I not committing a God of the gaps fallacy right now? How do I know it was God who created the heavens and the earth? I think it's just a conclusion that follows from the evidence that we have. So the universe came into being from nothing, right? And the universe is as vast, the universe is very vast. We don't even know, we've not seen, right? We've not seen most of it. So we can look with telescopes into the observable universe, but that's just a fraction of what the universe actually is. And even that fraction, there's still a lot to explore. So the universe is so vast. The universe in its vastness came from absolutely nothing, as we see, because as we see from science observations. Why? Because everything, including matter, including space, including time, right, all came into being at the point of the Big Bang, or what science called the Big Bang, which is the beginning of the universe. Now, from the laws of science as well, from philosophy and science, there's a law called the law of causality, which means everything that is observed to have come into being, or that can be proven to have come into being, must have a cause. There must be a causating or a causative factor to anything that comes to be. So there could be, this jacket I'm putting on right now. There has to be a causating factor for this jacket. This jacket did not exist forever. There was a point that this jacket did not exist, and then one day it came into being. And it not just come to being by itself. There has to be a cause. So a causality, that's the law of causality. And the law of causality shows us that there has to be, everything that comes to be must have a cause. Therefore, the universe, we know that the universe coming to be, the universe came to be at the Big Bang, right? Coming to being was the Big Bang of the universe. That's what the Big Bang did to the universe. It brought the universe to be. And the universe was when there was no universe, before the universe, there was no time, there was no space, there was no matter. So whatever would have caused so there was anything that existed before, in quotes and unquote, because it's not a chronological before, because time did not exist before the universe, and ontological before. So anything that existed prior, ontologically prior to the universe, had to be outside of space, also outside of time, and outside of matter. So it must be spaceless. The cause of the universe had to be spaceless, had to be outside of matter, that is immaterial. The cause of universe has to be timeless, so it's standing outside of time. And so we have three attributes following from the evidence from the beginning of the universe. There's timelessness of the cause because it's created time. There's a spacelessness of the cause because it created space in the universe. Created this universe that created space that came into being with time, space, and matter. It has to be immaterial and timeless, spaceless, immaterial. So there are three things. Now the other things. There's the first thing that following from the evidence that cause has to be extremely powerful. That cause, number five, has to be extremely intelligent. Why? Because the universe is so finely designed. Look at the we are in the Goldilocks zone. Is a term in astronomy that is essentially saying where we are is the most optimal place, one of the most optimal places in the universe for life to exist, and that's where we are. Right? It's so finely designed. When we look, when you watch that video, the SURG, second law of thermodynamics, the five things I mentioned, the five aspects of space science that show um that the universe had a beginning. When you go through all of that, you will see how great galaxy seeds show how finely designed, how finely tuned the universe actually is. Look at the systems, even on Earth. Let's talk on Earth alone. How they depend on each other. The flora depends on the fauna. That is, plants depend on animals, and vice versa. Right? We depend on plants for oxygen. They depend on us for carbon dioxide. Not to talk of the ecosystems, the mini and macro ecosystems. It goes on and on. It goes on and on and on. So it has to be. So the universe is finely designed. So it's called the intelligent design. Is finely tuned and finely designed that shows us that it has to be. It cannot be as a cause of cosmic accidents. I think it's just the logical conclusion to draw from this. It cannot be as a result of a cosmic accident, right? Um, Chaos does not lead to order, right? The cosmic accidents that many attribute to be what the Big Bang is cannot lead to order. All right. So chaos cannot lead to order. And yeah, that is one thing that we have to know about the is one of the following, sorry, excuse me, 1 second again, is one of the things that follow, right, from the evidence that we have. So it has to be intelligent, the cause has to be intelligent, the cause has to be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, extremely powerful. And if it is intelligent, it has to be, maybe it chose, right, it has to choose to create. So it has to be personal, it has a will, it's a person, right? All of these things can be attributed to God. But the evidence just flows that whoever this being is, or whoever this cause is personal. It's not just a mindless force. Why? Because it's also intelligent and it's timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and extremely powerful. Why? Because it's created the vastness of the universe, the intelligence of the universe, and how finally designed it is, because order cannot come from chaos, from disorder, right? The law of entropy even contradicts, even supports that, or contradicts the fact that order coming from disorder. And because so this being also created time, space, and matter with the universe, because the universe came to existence with time, space, and matter. Before the creation of the universe, there was no time, space, and matter. The logical conclusion, just following where the evidence leads, right? The evidence leads us to conclude that all of these characteristics of this being that I mentioned has to be God, right? And that's the conclusion of Christianity, as that God is responsible for everything. So is that a God of the gaps fallacy? No, because there is I have seen some arguments from atheist scientists that there is going to be a time that we'll find out what caused the universe, and science people are working on that. And so whenever they do, we'll not have any argument to say it is God anymore. The truth is, we even when if science we see, right, in intelligence design, in morality, that God does exist, and if God exists, it is just the logical, it is the natural consequence. It's following where the evidence leads. It's logical and natural conclusion that he would be, right? If the character of God is who he is, he would be in charge and the originator of everything. The originator of everything. So, with that said, um, yeah, all of these things that I've just mentioned is this is a part of it. But all of the things I've just mentioned is really essentially to show that science does have a relationship with Christianity and with the Bible, but it doesn't. They are not essentially contradictory. And there's another thing which is another thing. So another thing, right, to make note of is that the Bible in and of itself is not a scientific book. Also, because when people say the science have a relationship with the Bible, and many of the argument that people have to say, oh, Christianity and science are at odds, is because they look in the Bible and there are some facts in the Bible that are not, as at the time that it was being written, they are not accurate scientifically, right? Um, like for example, in Joshua telling the sun to stand still, right? And then the sun did not rise or set. When people say, oh, that story is not true because the writer did not know that the sun, or Joshua himself did not even know, who was the writer anyway, that the sun does not revolve around the earth, right? And so, because scientifically the earth revolves around the sun, and the reason for sunrise and sunset is because the earth is spinning on its axis. So, so a part is facing the sun, that's where the sun is shining. When it's facing away from the sun, that's where there's night. So people say, oh, Joshua did not know this, writer did not know this, so they don't know. It's contradictory to science, so it is not true. But that is not true. That fact is not true because the context and the focus of the Bible is not scientific accuracy. As Apostle Paul writing to Timothy says, he said the Bible is meant to show us Jesus. For it's a story of salvation, right? And it's describing what happened with Joshua. The story what happened with Joshua, for example, is a story of a man who, yes, did not have the perfect knowledge of science, but was communicating. He was, running an errand on God's command, right? And communicating, I think it was a prayer, right? From his understanding, but God understood what he meant and did what he meant, not what he said, right? Because he was limited by his knowledge at the time, of course. He was limited by, and of course, that's not even Joshua alone, even up till just a number of decades ago, right? That they are still, I think in the 90s if or 80s, in the 20th century anyway, if I'm not mistaken, that scientists still believed that the earth, right, was the center of the universe. So it was not is the Bible is not a book on science. It's not a book on astronomy, on biology. And so it is a book on salvation. So we cannot say, and people say, oh, because the Bible has errors, scientific errors, therefore it's not true. The Bible can have errors on science, and it will be permissible and it will still be effective for what it was meant to do, because what it was meant to do was show us salvation. All right. If it gets other details wrong on the matters that apply to salvation and we can verify historically, then we can have a problem. But scientific facts that do not necessarily directly have an impact on the salvation story, we can permit it. If I have a book that is based on artificial intelligence, which is what I'm doing, right, and then it gets some biological details wrong, or it gets some details on, say, music music theory wrong, right? There's still a part that I can trust that book on artificial intelligence, because that is what I want that book for. If it tells me a wrong detail on music theory, I can say, okay, yeah, they probably do not know much in this area. But if they are getting details wrong on artificial intelligence, then that book is not a great book to read. And we can say it is erroneous, right? But I can't say it is erroneous because, yeah, it does get some facts wrong, but that's not the point of the book. So, yeah, there are a number of other things in scripture, but the point of the Bible is not to is not to show us science altogether. The point of the Bible shows God and Jesus, who He sent for the salvation of our souls. So, the Christianity has a relationship with science, but it's not one which are at odds, right? Science at best for Christianity is explaining, the universe as it were, and the things that the Lord had already put in motion. I hope I've been able to answer that question.